Good morning. My name is Melissa Taboada. I am the education editor at the Boston Globe, and I am joined today with Linda Chen. She is the Senior Deputy Superintendent of Academics for Boston Public Schools. Thanks so much for coming.
Of course.
Today we are going to be talking about desegregation in Boston. This year marks the 50th anniversary of that event. So just to get started, while things have significantly changed in some ways, there's still a lot of progress that needs to be made. So just hoping you can walk me through, what the state of BPS schools are today and what you and the district envision for the future.
Mm-hmm. As you said, there is so much more progress that needs to be made from 50 years ago. We are still grappling with fundamentally the same issues around access for all of our students across the city as we were dealing with 50 years ago. I think that what is different today is what the meaning of that access and excellence is, from what is sort of the idea of a sound basic education is much more nuanced, and I believe we are trying to uphold a higher set of standards of what our students should have access to. And when, certainly in my role, my focus is on what students are learning, how students are learning, and to what the degree the system is providing that equal opportunity for learning. And when we look at some things just like MCAS, it's a single measure, but it does continue to indicate that we need to do more for our students, all of them, and particularly around eliminating the disparities in achievement while boosting performance for all students across the board. And that is something that we still struggle with. I think 50 years ago, we were talking about making sure that there's access to a seat. It is much more than just a seat. It's a quality seat, if you will. I almost hate talking about it as if it's something that's not personal, but it is about making sure that we across the system are providing high quality learning experiences for every single one of our students wherever they live, and making sure that parents truly have choice. And their choice should not be up to the luck of what school happens to have the things that will help their child be successful. It needs to be on trust that the system is providing high quality experiences where students feel like they belong, and because of that belonging, they can succeed and thrive and flourish everywhere across the city. And I think what we're trying to do is make sure that we have the high quality materials, curriculum, that is responsive to our students in terms of their culture, their language, but especially grade level standards. That is something that we haven't provided consistently across the board in every single school. And that is definitely what we're doing right now. We can't expect students to rise to the level of proficiency for grade level standards if we don't provide them and give them access and meaningful engagement in grade level curriculum.
Thank you for that. You mentioned the MCAS and results came out yesterday. Mm-hmm. We saw across the state that students lost even more ground than they had. They were already behind, since the pandemic started. And the disparities have been widening, among student groups, continuing to harm students of color. And so, you mentioned a couple of things that you guys are trying to do, but is there anything that we haven't done before that we could do so that we can close those achievement gaps?
Mm-hmm. There are a couple of things. I want to go back to the piece around, and it's not a small thing, and making sure that every student in every single class has access to those materials that are at grade level is really essential. What is typical, and it comes from a well-meaning place, what is typical in a system where we've struggled to ensure students have grade level proficiency is we want to lower the level of work to make it easier so students can be more successful. But those well-meaning actions have led to students not actually having access and receiving that grade level support. I think it's pretty clear if a student does not have access to the expectations of what they should be learning, of course, they're not going to rise to that level of proficiency. And I know it might seem simple, but that's not something we've done in the past. That is something new and different. It shouldn't be, but it is. I think another aspect of what we're doing under Superintendent Skipper's leadership is also making sure that we expand what we call our hub community schools. And that is the bringing together of both the academic piece around high standards and preparing our teachers. I think that's another piece. Our job is to make sure we provide our teachers with the resources and the supports that they need to support our students, but is also integrating the engagement of the community in this work. It is about making sure that students have a safe place to come to school every day, a place where they have food, access to food, and have access to clothing, and access to a place where the entire staff welcomes our children through the doors and they feel a sense of belonging and they are getting that support around the academic learning piece. And part of the work around our hub school strategy is to make sure that we really partner alongside our families and our communities. This is not about doing to our families and communities, but with, in order to make sure our students thrive.
So when you're talking about these kinds of, benefits, if you will, for students, I mean, they're wraparound services. These are, things that students need to thrive in and outside of school. Like, how much are those two things tied together?
I think that they're inextricably tied together. We can't expect our students to be successful if they don't have access to some basic needs. And I think that is a part of it. And I would actually say it is beyond wraparound services. A lot of times wraparound there's a separate set of things that happen before and after school. But what we're talking about, in order for students to academically achieve, it has to be an integrated effort. It is that close partnership with families. Our families are our children's first teachers, and the education of the students needs to be alongside with our families and with our partners in the community that support our students. So it's not just a day shift where teachers are there for the educating of the students, and then there's an after school and before shift of other providers. It's really the providers working together with the school community under the leadership of our school leaders to be able to make sure that every moment a student is in our buildings counts towards their learning. Some of the things are more indirect, like access to food, arts, supports, and activities, health. Those are all really integral to students being able to learn and thrive.
Going back to desegregation, frankly, the history of desegregation and busing in Boston was pretty ugly. The district's now rolling out a new curriculum for students. So what is involved in that curriculum and what students are going to be able to learn that material?
We're really grateful, first and foremost, for our partners Facing History and ourselves around a curriculum that they have put together specifically around the 50th anniversary of desegregation of Boston, of history in Boston. And it's an ugly history. It is. I work alongside staff who were on those buses, who remember rocks being thrown at them as children. That's real. And we want to make sure that every new teacher that comes into our system, whether they grew up here or not, folks coming in who grew up here may not even really remember some of these things. But it is important to us, and that's why we include this in our new teacher induction, and we've done this for, I believe, the last 5 years. Part of what they are learning is the history of desegregation in the city of Boston, because that history is important to remember as a catalyst for why we need to do the work we do every day, and to understand also how our communities, who are our partners in this, have been struggling and dealing with the system, not necessarily delivering for their kids. And so that is part of how we're using some of the curriculum that's been put out. It is also something that is integrated into our standards. So I talked a little bit before about the importance of making sure we teach at the level of standards for all of our students. That content is also present in various parts of our humanities and history standards from the state. So that is another way that that work is integrated in. We also have had the fortune of working with local folks. We have a group of retired educators that we've been working with to really ensure that access to that history. So that's also another way that that work is happening. Angela Headley Mitchell, which is who's our executive director of humanities, this is something that she has really spearheaded, and actually last year even did some training with our central office educators and instructional coaches, because it is something that we deem to be really important and integrated into the work that we do every day. And I would also add, this isn't just commemorating 50 years and looking back and learning from it to move forward, but it is work that we are doing every day and needs to and is a part of the fabric of what we do.
So what grade levels will be actually receiving this curriculum?
They're receiving it in their various grade level standards. So largely in grades 8 through 12,
okay,
in our sort of secondary grades. But it is something that we make sure that all of our teachers have access to, even if they aren't teaching the higher grades.
Why did what was behind the decision to not make it mandatory curriculum?
I think, first of all, it's not just a moment in time. It is also making sure that the content that is part of that curriculum is embedded not in only in the subjects that we teach, but in how our teachers understand the history in the way that it impacts the daily work that we do. So we didn't want to just make it a piece that's mandated in a moment in time. We want it to be integrated in all the things that we do. I think another piece that's really important to note is that the kind of teaching that we're talking about includes really being reflective about one's own mindset and your understanding of something that happened here and where our students are at today. That all needs and requires training and support for teachers to have. And so when you just put out a mandate, it often falls short on what you're really trying to accomplish. So we're really trying to make sure that teachers have the full understanding and feel confident teaching this and having the resources that they need. So it's both, all of those things together.
Okay. You know, right now there are schools in BPS that are under-enrolled, and some advocates, believe that school closures may be one of the answers in creating the quality schools, the quality seats that you had mentioned before. What can Boston expect from the school district in terms of closures for the future?
So school closures are very difficult. It is so hard to say to a community that in which the school is a bedrock in that neighborhood. Many people have memories, right, of them being in those schools, so it's a very, very difficult thing. But it's also a necessary process to make sure that we can have all the resources that our students need in those schools. And so how we're approaching that is through community engagement. I think that when these hard decisions have to be made, it's really important for the community to be engaged in hearing what their hopes are, as well as our vision for what we need to do on behalf of the students in the city. And that community process, it's hard because everyone doesn't have the same perspective. And I wish it were easier, but we have to have these conversations, and then decisions have to be made by the mayor, the superintendent, the school committee, and those are courageous decisions that are going to have to be made so that we can provide the resources. So it really is around community engagement. It is also around looking at patterns of where our students live, who our students are in the various pockets of the city, because first and foremost, it is our job to ensure that there's a high quality seat. We sometimes talk about that, but high quality learning in every school across the system. And then parents can, if they choose, go to a school near home. They shouldn't have to make a choice because the quality is different 10 miles away than it is half a mile from home. The choice should really be about what does my child love to do? And what are the things that my child wants to learn? In any given household, if a parent has 3 kids, they may not even choose to have all their children go to the same school. They should make a choice based on what their child needs, what their strengths are, and any choice should be a good one for all of our families, and that's what we're trying to do. So we're also strategically looking at placing certain kinds of programs. We are expanding bilingual programming so that we have dual language programs across the city. It should not be that a family has to go on a long bus ride to get to one of these programs. Also, our special education services, that should be somewhere, every parent should be able to have access to those services without having a child be on a long bus ride for an hour and a half. That is just not
which is happening now.
Yeah.
How do you go about, those decisions and balance that with not disproportionately affecting students who are already marginalized?
Yeah. And that is why we are always thinking first about the students we've historically underserved. Because if we think first about our students with disabilities, our students who are multilingual learners, our Black and Latinx students, if we can first think about how we partner with communities to ensure that it's not just about meeting needs, but who they are and their strengths are seen in our schools. If we prioritize those students, we know that everyone will benefit, and that's part of what we're doing. Now, it is difficult because in our district, that is the majority of our students. And every day we strive to make sure we center those that we've historically marginalized as a system and historically underserved. And that is really our beginning point and our priority.
Well, we're getting close to time, but before we close, is there anything else that you wanted to share about the state of BPS or just, your hope for the district and its students?
I would say that the partnership with our families is incredibly important. We are very serious and understand that we have trust to build with our families. And I strongly encourage our families to really reach out to their school leaders, their school communities, and work alongside them. I also encourage folks to come out to the community meetings that we will continue to have for many years to come now in terms of thinking about the school closures and consolidations, because the community input and feedback really matters. And I would also ask folks to know that everyone is not going to agree on everything. We have to come to a place where we can agree on some of the most fundamental aspects so we can move forward. Otherwise, we're going to be a system that doesn't move forward for our students, and that is not the right thing for us to do as a community across the city. So we have to come to some agreements on some fundamental aspects of decisions that need to be made. They can no longer be delayed decisions. We have to be able to move forward.
All right, well, thank you so much, Dr. Chen. I really appreciate you coming and talking with us today.